Yeah, board members, just a little note to let you know that we have business cases and they've basically kind of been chunked into three groups. This first group that we're discussing right now is the group that were proposed by individual or multiple board members. And then we have another group that was created after requests for information were asked by board members. And then we have another group that are requests from the field. So we will have today for, I think an hour is our amount of time, perhaps a little more. And then we have tomorrow 2 hours to discuss all of this. Any questions on just that process and the time allotments before we begin? Okay. I think we have an assumption that our board members have come prepared and can bring forward business cases to support. But did you have something that you wanted to say prior, Deputy Superintendent Jones?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. So, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. One of the other requests that was made is, obviously this is an iterative process year to year, and we wanted to make sure that we started this off orienting you to the success we had last year with your requests, right? So that's what this sheet is that's displayed in front of you now, is to provide, and we can include it in the backups all the way going forward too, but we wanted just to make sure that you had seen again, especially since we haven't met since June, but then going forward, what this process has resulted in. Now, this is just last year's results, but if you can see, or anyone can see, that over the last 5-6 years, the legislature's been very supportive of, funding for, even during the COVID pandemic. And so we feel strongly as staff that this process is a good one in the sense that it does result in measurable outcomes in the sense of funding. The other piece to this too is that you'll see here in a second, Chief Staff Young's going to bring this up, is, we refer to tracker all the time. So this was the culmination of the tracking of the process last year, right? You started off, you made your recommendations and things like that. And so you'll see a revised tracker in the sense, with it's very good, put together by Mr. Call. So that's going to be just, really good. And then so as we move together through this, and because the next big deliverable is after your October meeting, or we have to send up by law what you are recommending to the governor to put into his budget proposal to the legislature. So that's the deliverable. I mean, it's required by law, and so my understanding is that we're not going to use this meeting here to talk about priorities yet or anything. It's just as Vice Chair Davis stated. We want to make sure that this is exclusively board driven, and that we as staff are working and putting forward what you direct us to do so. And so we've made progress along that line. So subject to any questions about, last year's results and the way forward here today, I think we can turn it over to Chief of Staff Young at your direction, ma'am.
Thank you. Did you want to say something, Chief of Staff Young?
Yeah, thank you. So, Chief of Staff Sarah Young, again, we would like to give credit for what I'm sharing on your screen to our new Director of Strategic Initiatives, Todd Call. So one of the great things about this tracker is that it is highlighted kind of in a color coding fashion to be able to help us track as a group which business cases have been voted on and or which have not or are not currently board supported. So this is exactly the same PDF that was submitted in the board backup, just an active version. You'll see that those are in green are the ones that in June of 2022, the board moved forward to be on the board supported list. So as we start the process, and I'm going to start with one of our business cases that was brought forward by one of our board members, Board Member Booth. After you have the opportunity to be able to consider consider, is this business case board supported? I will then be noting that here in this column. And if I change from to be determined to yes, you'll see it turns green. And that's really designed to be able to help you in terms of knowing which ones we've addressed and which ones we may not have. If the board makes a different decision and decides like, no, that does not move forward, it's red. So I just wanted to flag that color coding piece for you to be able to track kind of along with the conversation where we are in our process so that you kind of have a sense of where we're trying to get to by the end of the discussion.
That's so helpful. Thank you. And just to be very clear, if we vote to support something today, that means it's on our list of not necessarily priorities, but it is on our list of programs or things that we do support. It will be sent to the governor's office with the group. It will be sent to the legislature with the group. But that will become the group that we use for the next month to do our ranked choice ordering. And then we will determine our top 10, if you will, plus give or take, 2 or whatever, for our priorities. So I'll go ahead and entertain motions now. And I realized we're actually an hour behind schedule. That was a really long conversation about statutory changes. So I am going to ask board members to consider speaking once for or against these proposals, since we all had them ahead of time. Thanks for considering that. Well, we have 8 minutes left instead of an hour left. So we're only, 52 minutes behind. Okay. Okay. You are Vice Chair Belknap in my screen. So Chair Huntsman.
But I just wanted, for that's kind of a point of order or just for clarity. You can still be against something with the way you vote. You also can be for something with the way you vote. There's not a requirement to speak to it like you're lobbying.
Oh, correct.
Unless you really want to take your time.
I'm just saying, if you're going to speak, try to get it into one comment instead of 5.
Yeah, thank you.
I see no lights, so we have no board member Booth.
All right. On the first page of the business case for BTS, I didn't get it to them in time, but I want to reverse those paragraphs where we actually describe the request so that the second paragraph with a little bit of tweaking would, when you first start reading it, would say, provide equity and access to every K-6 student in Utah by providing funding for every public elementary school in the state for a qualified arts educator to provide integrated arts learning through the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program.
So you're just asking to switch those paragraphs?
So that the priority of this business case is to get it to every student. And then in support of getting it to every student, we have discovered through the last several years that we don't have enough coaching going on to help the LEAs know how to use these resources the best.
We want to try not to, if possible, get into wordsmithing and changing around. But I think without objection, does anyone object if we make that change?
Switch those 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, let's submit that to staff then
Okay,
without
great.
a vote. It sounds like there's not objection to that. Thank you very much. Board Member Booth? Do you have a motion?
I do.
Okay.
I move that we support the BTS program as it's been presented here in the business case, and that we move it forward for our consideration in the month of October as we prioritize those priorities.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Board Member Cannon's hand went up first, so I'm going to go with Board Member Cannon. Thank you. We have a motion on the floor that the board moves that the draft business case for BTS be supported for the 2023 general session. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I think you know what I would say. Thank you.
I think we heard some great board member comments today about that.
Yes.
Board Member Hanson.
Not speaking to this one.
Okay, Member Lear.
I could just say what Randy said. You know what I would say. I did, though, I have to say again, I sat with the POPs organizations for 2 days and heard how they add to our schools. BTS is one of those, one of the most successful, one that has largely funded itself for all these years. And the most amazing, well, yes, the most amazing thing I heard in those 2 days was the cooperation among the arts organizations and how they work together to enrich schools for students, which we could never afford with Utah's funding if we didn't have a lot of volunteer efforts and a lot of money specifically from Mrs. Sorensen's legacy. So it is time that we ask to have the state support something we know is working.
Member Cannon.
Yes, I just refer back to reading Teacher of the Year applications and noting how many of those, our most outstanding teachers, are using the Beverly Taylor Sorensen's arts programs in their classrooms, making differences for kids, increasing scores in reading and math. I think we know from years and years of research that when we add the arts to our curriculum, it improves our test scores. And I think it's just a tragedy that this program is not available to every elementary school student in our state. So I'd really very much support this.
Thank you. Members Hanson, Earl, or Moss, are any of you speaking on this issue? Member Moss?
I'll be quick. I just had a conversation with Member Booth a little while ago. One thing that I'd overlooked a little bit about this is the integration of the arts across the subject matters, and I thought that was a compelling element. I love the arts and support them. I think it's one of the best ways to deal with some of the emotional stress that's out there. But this item of integration and using it to teach science and history is something that I don't know that we addressed last time, frankly, and perhaps I just overlooked it. But I thought that was an important element of what this aims to accomplish.
Thank you, Member Earl.
I have one comment, and then I just have a point of clarification, if I can ask. I do think that this particular program is highly valuable. I do think, though, it is also highly valuable to have volunteers and charitable donations and that kind of a thing, too, because I think they add value. But I do think allowing this to be expanded in a way that we can continue with the charitable donations and those things, they add value to our schools and our society. But I just have a point of clarification. In my mind, we have no framework or boundary today. Am I asking that right? It's like whatever you want, right, is what we're voting for.
Deputy.
There is no framework.
Deputy Superintendent Jones, do we have an idea of what our funding is going to look like this year? Do we have, can you tell us what our funding was last year, how much was funded, and what our total request would be if all of these were funded this year?
Right. So, and that's a lot, if I may, Madam Chair, that's a lot of the reason why we wanted to start off with showing you what we did last year, right? So we ended up being appropriated $7.2 billion. So basically the legislature estimated that income tax receipts, corporate tax receipts would be $7.2 billion. While there's some early indications or predictions on what that will be, it's too early at this point for me to say, well, this is what you can anticipate revenue will be for public education. As part of this iterative process, we really don't find, we start to get indications of that this month, but late after your meeting, when we start to go to in September with the EAC meetings, right? The Executive Appropriations Committee start to put out, indicators of what revenue will be leading into the session. So from a revenue standpoint, no one should really say, hey, plan on getting this amount of money for public education or do it. Would I love that to start that way? Yes. I mean, a budgeting process, you'd love to start with, hey, you can expect it, for this. So that in itself shouldn't be a constraint or a parameter, right, is to say with revenue. At the same time, though, we were asked, if you saw I did send out the governor's GOPB guidance, on the process. They asked us to be considerate of, that we can anticipate a recession, things like that. But that shouldn't prevent any of you or as a body putting any one of these forward or all of them. It's at your discretion at this point, right? Because we're not, my understanding was we're not going to get into prioritization or anything during this meeting.
That's
So,
and I guess that's what
yeah.
I'm asking. So this is
Right.
more of a Christmas wish list, and then we do the shopping later kind of a thing? Is that, okay?
Yeah.
I'm just making sure, because otherwise my brain
Right.
thinks differently.
We
Yeah,
do the
it-
prioritizing later.
Yeah, right, we
just
do
to
the
be clear.
prioritization.
We feel good about it.
Yeah, because right now, and this is really important, is we want you to focus on the board member ones, that are in the yellow part or the gold part, however, I see it as gold, but some other people see it as yellow. Then, we get to the end of the day today, we still have the study session tomorrow. Because we also really want you we're really trying to do it differently this year, and this is why a lot of the reason why I started early, is so you don't feel rushed, that you have time to review the business cases and to come back with questions. I mean, eventually we are going to run out of time, I get that, but, this was really intended to provide as much of a lead time as possible for you to decide which ones you do want to go forward.
Thank you. Chair Huntsman?
Oh, I'm just in the queue.
Okay.
Sorry. I'll step
We have a motion on the floor that the board moves the draft business.
Raising hand,
Oh,
sorry.
Vice Chair Belknap.
I'm sorry, I was raising my hand. I have 2 points of clarification. One, Board Member Earl was asking, what does this really mean? Yes, but when we do our Christmas wish list, this entire list will be something that our office and the legislature and the governor's office will see that we have put forward. The prioritizing of maybe our top 10 will be later. Second, I have a question. Do we really receive funding from the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Foundation for this program any longer? Number two, how much is already in this program, and what will the total be if we add what Board Member Booth has asked for?
Can we get answers to those questions? How much private money is going into BTS? How much state money currently is going into BTS? And when we add the request, what will the total be?
Yeah, so ma'am, if I may, Madam
Okay.
Chair, so the answer to the question is, do we get, or is it funded from the foundation? Yes, absolutely. I don't have the amount with me right in front of me, though. So we're getting that amount for
Okay.
you, but I don't have it off the top of my
We
head, I'm
have
sorry.
phone a friend going on.
We're phoning a friend,
and-
yes, ma'am.
But do we know how much state money is going in currently? Is that in our?
I think it is in the business case, so we're pulling it up, but I don't know it off the top of my head, so.
Okay. Are you ready, Dr. Norman? Dr. Thronson?
Thank you. Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. And the one I can answer, we're recruiting Kathy, she's somewhere in the building, is there is no funding from the BTS Foundation any longer. It is all state funded at this time. And we're pulling up the COBE to tell you how much in current funding there is for this program, which did increase last session. It looks like, give us one more moment. there's a little in admin, and we're going to find the actual program. That's everything.
While she's looking that up, Board Member Norton, do you want to speak to BTS or something else?
That sounds right.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So up on the screen, you see the total amount that's currently funded, which is about 17 million. The LEAs have to match 20% of that. So we have an 80% allocation from the state and a 20% match from the LEAs. So from the state funding, you're at that 17 million, but there's additional funding coming from the local LEAs if they choose to participate.
And would that continue with this additional 9.8 million?
Yes, the intent is to keep the model, but just to grow the program so every student can have access.
Thank you. Seeing no more hands, we have a motion on the floor that the board directs staff to work with legislators on potential amendments to Utah Code as proposed for the Beverly Taylor. Let me just back up and redo this. We have a motion on the floor that the board moves that the draft business case for BTS be supported for the 2023 general session. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Board Member Vice Chair Belknap, are you on board?
Yes.
Are you a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Hanson.
I'd like to make a motion that we support the school improvement USBE capacity business case.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor that the board moves that the draft business case for school improvement be supported for the 2023 general session. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Just briefly, this case is fairly straightforward right now for school improvement. There's a requirement in code that we use an external improvement service provider to coach basically the schools that are in some kind of improvement program. Right now, Springboard and Elevate would be the ones that we're looking at, the service provider. I'm proposing a change to code that would allow USBE to be that external service provider so that we could, I think the advantages of doing that are, one, we probably can do it more cost effectively, but even if we can't, it would keep the institutional knowledge here in the state, would allow us to share best practices, and would also allow us to develop a continuous improvement program within the state of Utah that would be consistent among schools. So the ask is for $250,000. That would be ongoing money, and that would fund two heads here at USBE who would be, I would envision, experienced school improvement specialists that have perhaps, we cherry pick those or headhunt those from providers that have already been out there and are experienced in this.
Thank you. Members Norton, Moss, and Earl, are any of you speaking for this? And then I'll come to you. Yes. Member, okay. Member Moss? Member Moss?
Okay, I think I'm getting at the head of the line. I was going to defer, but I'll be quick. Question, I support this. I like it. I think we looked at this last legislative session about whether we had alternatives. One thing I'm curious about is if we have this in-house capacity, does in-house extend to finding mentors among LEAs that are of a similar mission? We had some discussion about this in the last legislative session. And I'm obviously the in-house that we would be paying for would be people here in this building. But would that include the opportunity to perhaps pull those folks in where we find expertise in the area of focus of a particular school or experience with that kind of challenge that they're facing in turnaround?
Can I respond to that? And this again is, there's folks from staff that could comment as well, but my idea would be that when I talk about sharing best practices, that's where the best practices come from. We would pull someone who's doing something well from one school and allow them to, articulate what they've done, lay out their, history and their experience with that, allow other schools to adopt that.
Thank you, Member Earl.
I might have to, you got me thinking another line. I should always write these down. Hold on just 1 second.
I can come back to you. Member Norton?
No, I'm on.
Oh, I'm back to you.
Oh, I do. My question is this. Do we already have funding that goes to help these schools, even though it's not with USBE? wouldn't this just be a, maybe a legislative change for that funding? I'm just trying to figure out, are we double funding now? Does that make sense? Is that inaccurate or?
No,
Deputy Superintendent Stallings?
thank you. Yes, so currently, schools that are designated either Elevate or Springboard schools would be allocated, and I think it's about $120,000 a year over the 3 years or so, where they can contract with external providers. My understanding of what Board Member Hanson is speaking to is that instead of contracting with an external provider to get those supports in order to improve their school improvement, they could actually elect to work with staff, USBE staff on that. Normally, I think the reason why the upfront cost of the staff is anticipated is it's a little more difficult for us as an agency to hire people without, we don't have that same ability that a private business might have to kind of build up their business and then charge. So I think over time, and this is now Angie, as I read. And
No, I think it states that in the business case. This would be self-funded after some time, but upfront, we
Okay,
need to have folks.
I guess
that are-
that's what I was looking at. Are we double funding something? So you're saying that we would actually charge, if they choose to use us, we would charge them?
Yes, but it's a build it and they will come kind of thing, right? We have to
Perhaps.
first have the capacity in place before we can sell that capacity, and then the funding needs should diminish over time as revenue comes in.
Okay, so that's an interesting dimension for the state board to be in the business of.
Thank you. Member Cannon?
Just a point of clarification, would this preclude, as Springboard or Elevate School, from using an external provider? Or this is just meant to give them a choice?
It's just a choice.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other lights, we have a motion on the floor that the board moves the draft business case for school improvement be supported for the 2023 general session. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Okay, we have, that passes with members Earl and Klein saying no. Just those two. Member Norton?
Yes. I would like to move that the board support the statewide online education program business case to support the small schools with additional funding.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the board moves the draft business case for SOEP be supported for the 2023 general session. And you got that there was a second by Chair Huntsman. Member Norton, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would. Currently, there's about $14 million set aside for SOEP. Only $680,000 of that is set aside for the small schools, which are schools that are less than or areas that are less than 1,000 students. And there is very low usage of that because these LEAs are so concerned about an overuse that they're not advertising it. They're not requesting students take these classes. If you worked it out, that $680,000 that's set aside for them would basically give one school one credit for the year. And so that's why they're not widely asked. Meanwhile, there is $14 million in that account. The rest of that goes to private and homeschool. The homeschool group's using about $1 million, and the rest of that's left for private school. Now, we had originally asked that half of that money be split over, transitioned over to the small schools. This is the Christmas list, so instead of, the transition over, we're just asking, this is showing me now that the request is to just add that money in for those small schools so that they can then have it. Right now, small schools are having a hard time with resources. They can't get chemistry teachers and calculus teachers, et cetera. And so that's why this is so vital to them, for these kids to have some equity in their education, that, that they are able to take some of these advanced classes to get them into, to the good colleges, and yet they can't get them, a live body in their schools. So this would go a long ways to help them.
Thank you. Members Moss and Earl, and Chair Huntsman, are you speaking toward this issue? Are you speaking to the motion?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Member Moss.
Quick question. So there is a current pot. My understanding, we also have buried a little bit deeper in the business cases, money for private and homeschool. This would not logically preclude seeking money for private and homeschoolers, correct? This is an independent ask. And then if we also chose to ask for X, Y, or Z amount for private and homeschool based on demand, this wouldn't block that. It's a separate freestanding request, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, but are we on the right track there?
Yes.
Yes, I'm getting yeses from the support team.
Member Earl?
Yes, I'm just wondering about, and I'm sure you've checked into this, I read through the thing, but the usability, people are asking for it.
I'm sorry,
right? Is that okay if I ask her that?
Go ahead.
Member Moore, they're asking for it, right? Okay, because I just see some other programs out there too. That's all I'm asking is if you're
Yes.
getting, okay, that's all I want to know.
They're in great need. Okay.
Chair Huntsman?
Yes, thank you. And I was a second, so I thought I'll just throw a couple sentences in on this. They're not even asking, they're desperate for it. The solution is in the SOAP, and they got to have access to the dollars. And with everything that's happening in this great state, great opportunity, a lot of extra money that goes to a lot of extra things, this is a deficit. This is a negative thing that's impacting our rural schools, is trying to get talent in there. And these young kids that are, the kids in the rural schools need this opportunity, and this is an important part of the solution. And so I echo what was said earlier, and if we can get this realigned a little bit differently, it's a great solution to a problem that was yesterday, not coming up. It's a very big, significant problem. So ask for your support.
Thank you. Member Lear?
I think this should have been addressed right when SOEP went bigger, and I think it's unfortunate that in the beginning, rural schools did not have a proportionate access to these classes. So it cannot come fast enough. I really support this.
Thank you. So just to be clear, we're asking for $7 million in addition to what we already put into SOEP.
Yes.
Thank you. Seeing no other lights, we have a motion on the floor that the board moves the draft business case for SOEP to be supported for the 2023 general session. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Member Klein, abstention. Member Norton, your light is still on.
Sorry.
That's okay. 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 No one else is bringing any more cases in this section forward? Chair Huntsman?
Yeah, I was just looking at the clock, and maybe people are looking at the clock also. And we also get to work on this tomorrow, but I was kind of hoping that I took myself out of the queue so we could try to finish up about 3 so we can dive into some of these things. But if you want to take another one.
We can move on in the agenda and continue
Okay.
this tomorrow if
All
that's
right.
your preference. Okay, so then we'll start back in board member requested business cases tomorrow at 1 p.m. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to committee reports. Chair Moss. Members, do we need a 5-minute quick break?
I'll have the chair.
Yes. Okay, 5-minute quick break for chairs to get ready for committee reports. Thank you.